Test. Hello? There we go. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dan Quinnell, and I'm the president of the local, the PA-OCN Chamber of Commerce. Really encouraged by the strong attendance here. This is good for the North, and this is good for democracy. So, just a little change up here. Originally we were gonna give the candidates 3 minutes to address the questions, just due to time constraints, a little conflict in scheduling. We're gonna shorten that up to 2 minutes. So it'll kind of help move the night along, and we can get to some more questions and a little bit quicker. So I just wanted to open here with the land acknowledgement. Just want to acknowledge the fact that we're all on Treaty 5 land, home of our friends and neighbors at OCN, as well as the Red River Métis and many other Indigenous groups. Once again, welcome. Just want to introduce our candidates here. So sitting right here on my right, we have Niki Ashton representing the NDP. We have Dylan Young with the People's Party of Canada sitting in the middle. And then we have Rebecca Chartrand on the end from the Liberal Party of Canada. And I just would like to acknowledge that this event is being co-hosted by the Chamber as well as UCN. And big shout out to UCN for putting on this event with all the technical support. And I know he's missing a Habs game right now to be here, so extra round of applause, eh? Good man. No, let's yeah, and just just a reminder, let's just keep it respectful. I know political debates can get heated sometimes, but let's just keep it classy and respectful, okay, guys? And then I just want to introduce our moderator for this evening, Mr. Monty Cashel, man who needs no introductions.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome to University College of the North. If you haven't been here before, we're happy to have this forum here today. It's good to hear from our political candidates and talk about topics that matter to us. So we've already laid out all the ground rules to the candidates already, but I'm going to let you know really quickly how things are going to go. We're going to have opening remarks first, and that's 3 minutes apiece. They have a small time clock in the back that they can look at. It's small. So they'll know how much time they have left. Please know that we won't be going past the time that they're allotted. So 3 minutes for the opening statements. Then we're going to go into some moderated questions, which I will ask. Those are 2 minutes apiece. Okay. If we have time, I hope we do, we're going to try and stop the questions that I'm asking at about 7:55. Then we're going to do some online questions that came in and questions from the floor. We have some time. We would have closing statements. And that's a good reminder to turn off your cell phones if you have them. We'll do closing statements, and then we'll wrap by 8:15. People can stick around and chat with candidates if they like after that. So we're going to start now with opening statements, and the first one to speak will be Niki.
Good evening. I acknowledge that we're on Treaty 5 territory, the traditional territory of Pasquia Cree Nation, and as well as the territory of the homeland of the Red River Métis. Thank you to the PA-OCN Chamber of Commerce for hosting us tonight. It's also great to be back at UCN as a former UCN instructor myself. This is an important election for our region. There are extremely important issues at stake. The choice you make on who is going to represent us in the House of Commons couldn't be more important. There has been attention on the economic challenges created by Donald Trump, and our NDP message is that we need to stand strong and fight back. But let's be clear, there are ongoing challenges in our communities and our region that go beyond Trump. And for those, it's clear we need a strong voice to fight for our region. You make a difference when you support the NDP because the NDP makes a difference for us. Whether it's the provincial NDP or the federal NDP, we fight for our region. In fact, this institution, UCN, was established by the NDP provincial government, received federal capital funding, and was able to expand thanks to Jack Layton and the NDP in a previous minority government. The NDP is rooted in our communities and in our region. I'm proud to work with MLAs Amanda Laughlin, Eric Redhead, Ian Bushy, and Tom Lindsay, expanding the legacy of the NDP, investing in infrastructure, moving forward on healthcare. We know that nothing happens unless we work together, work in partnership. Let's talk about the issues. The NDP delivered a historic expansion of healthcare with dental care and pharmacare. We're clear on the need to invest and not cut like the other parties are saying when it comes to healthcare. On infrastructure, from all-weather roads to rail and the Port of Churchill, the NDP has been a champion for infrastructure investments in the North. Over the last 50 years, it's been only the NDP that has championed extending all-weather roads and the Port of Churchill. On community safety, I've seen firsthand what our communities are going through when just a few months ago, a neighboring house in Thompson was the site of an RCMP SWAT operation because a fugitive, a suspected Toronto drug dealer, had fled to the house after a shooting in my neighborhood in Thompson. We need to be tough on crime and the causes of crime. And our youth, it's time to talk about the failures, to give youth the opportunities they deserve in our communities and support those who are supporting them. Let's not forget, we have one MP for Northern Manitoba, one of 14 MPs in Manitoba, one of 343 in Canada. We need to make our voice count. I was born and raised here in Northern Manitoba. I raised my family here in Manitoba. I'm not just visiting. With your support, I will continue to make sure that our voice is heard, that we fight back, because a vote for the NDP makes a difference for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Testing. Hi, bonjour, Tanseanin, Wapanunaquan Dishnakas, Wabashke Mangandutem, Pine Creek, Duck Bay, Bogarn, and Dunji, Winnipeg, Utanang. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Chartrand, and I am from Treaty 4 territory. My son and his family are from Treaty 5 territory. I'm a business owner, and I have family throughout the North. I think it's important to recognize that this is an important election, and it's an important election for the reason that you need somebody in government. You need somebody at the table. You need somebody who's willing to listen to people in community, and that is something that we're doing. I know that Niki Ashton likes to point out that the NDP have been bringing us this community, but we know government. So I think it's important to recognize that we've actually spent a lot of time traveling out through the. We've been listening to elders, listening to leaders. We were actually in Finland today, the mayor there.
Yeah,
Pardon?
little higher.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. So it's really important to consider who you're voting for, because you want somebody who understands the lay of the land, and that is me. You need somebody that is a bridge builder, somebody that's able to go out into community and to build those relationships. When we knock on doors, we hear that Niki Ashton has not been present in this riding for a long time. We know that she has not been effective as well. We've seen her for 17 years in this role, and she has not been able to bring anything into this riding, because the fact remains that the NDP have not been in government. They do not have decision-making power. And unfortunately, that is the reality. You know, I thank Niki for her advocacy, and we do need allyship right across this riding. But at the end of the day, you need somebody who's going to be sitting in Parliament, who's going to help bring attention to this riding. And that is something that we're doing. We've been on the ground in the trenches. We've been talking to people day in and day out. Unfortunately, we also haven't seen your candidate here next to me. He wasn't present at our last debate in Thompson. So I think we're demonstrating that you matter, because we're showing up at your doorsteps, we're meeting with your leadership, and that's what you need in this election. You need to make sure that somebody is going to be present in this riding for you. I know people say that I'm parachuting in, but that could be furthest from the truth. I am Anishinaabe. I am Innu. My people are from this land. I have family right throughout this land. My son and his family are from York Landing. So I want to fight for this riding, not because I want to be a politician. I want to fight because I want to get results, and that's what I do, and that is what I'm good at. I work with government, I work with leadership, and I want to work with all of you.
Thank you. Try that again.
I'll do my own thing and sit down instead. My name is Dylan Young, and I'm the candidate for the People's Party. I was born and raised in the Paw, and I continue to live in the Paw. I've always been here. I'm sure that some of you recognize me, although not all of you may know me personally. Part of the reason why I am running with the People's Party is that I am completely unsatisfied with any of the other choices. They do not represent anything that I would want, and I don't believe that they represent what other people want either. If you look at the statistics for each election, you'll notice that each election, 3,000 people drop off the map, that they don't vote anymore. They're not interested in voting. They've been burned by the system. They do not trust it. I believe that we need to get these people involved again, that to give them something they can trust more than what we already have. Besides that, one of the major approaches to fixing things that the People's Party has is to reduce immigration. It's draining our country, our economy, our infrastructure. We need to slow down and rethink things. We should be building up our cultural identity and forging stronger relationships with our neighbors. And I don't mean the US, I mean our actual neighbors, opening the door and knocking on it and saying, "Hi, how you doing? Have you had anything to eat today?" More than anything, I am looking forward to the choices that we're going to be making in this election, because they do matter. And it's not us who will experience these results. It's going to be our children and our grandchildren. We need to choose whether we want them to be born into debt, whether we want them to spend their entire lives working and never owning a house, because this is what people are concerned about nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant, if you could reset the clock to 2 minutes, we'll start into our questions. Now, you notice Niki went first with opening statements. Next will be Rebecca to answer the first question. Each candidate will answer that question. When we ask a new question, then it'll be Dylan's turn. We're going to keep going down and circulating through. So everybody's going to get a chance to be first, second, and third. The first question is going to go to Rebecca, and it revolves around healthcare. Access to healthcare in Northern Manitoba, especially in rural and First Nation communities, continues to be a serious concern. What will you and your party do to ensure people in northern communities receive equitable and timely healthcare services?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I think it's important to note that the federal government has already made huge investments into this riding. We see hospitals that are going up in Norway House, in Pimachikamak, and other places, but that's not enough. I think there has been some good steps made in terms of investments, but there's definitely a ways to go. So we know that there's hospitals that are being built, for example, but we now need operational budgets. So when you think about what's needed, we need to look at growing the economy. We see aging infrastructure across the riding, and we see businesses leaving. So if we look at focusing on the economy, all of the other things will fall into place. And I think I've heard this said well, so the economic horse needs to pull the social cart. And so we know we have huge issues. It's not just housing, it's aging infrastructure, it's health, it's all of these constellation of issues. So that's why you need somebody to, invigorate the North by focusing on what is possible. And then some of those other things will come with it. So we know there's also investments in dental and pharmacare that are on their way. But that's just the beginning. And that's why we need to ensure that we get a Liberal government so that we can continue moving things forward. We need to make sure that the people of the North are not forgotten. And so we talk about housing in Flin Flon, health in Flin Flon, the health in Thompson. A lot of people are having to come to Flin Flon or be medevaced out, for example, to get care in the city of Winnipeg. So we need to continue to fight for the North to make sure that we're addressing all of the needs in the North, including the health. So once again, the Liberal government has already made huge investments in the North, and we need to keep that going. And the only way that you can do that is by having somebody in a seat in government at the table to speak on your behalf. And we know that, the last 17 years, we've seen the roads crumbling. I think it's important to see who's been your MP in the riding during that time.
Dylan? Yep, should be on.
Okay, there we go. The question being how to ensure equitable healthcare in the North. I think it's best to take a longer scope view of the issue. We need to make sure that the money we're spending is being spent properly. We can't just keep dumping money into the issue and expect it to solve itself. We need proper plans and proper accounting of how the money is being spent. When I look at the hospital in town, I do know that one of the wards is closed. It's not, they aren't, the beds that are there are not available to the public. So there's something of a staffing shortage, but there's also likely redundancies in the hospital. All in all, I just believe that we need to get a proper accounting of the issue before we can make any decisions on it.
Okay. Niki?
First of all, I'm aware of course, the challenges we face in the north. I do live in Thompson. I raise my kids in Thompson, and we know the challenges that we faced. And in large part, it has owed to the cuts that Harper made when he was in power, and the fact that the Liberals didn't reverse the changes to the formula for funding of healthcare when they had the chance. And we also know how debilitating the 10 years of PC cuts have been to communities like the PAW and communities across our region. I'm encouraged by the commitments we've seen from the NDP government. We need to see a clinic here in the PAW. We need to see more capacity here in the PAW, including doctors, support for nurses, and healthcare professionals. And that means funding. That also means funding from the federal government. And it's nice to say that we all would like to see investments in healthcare, but the reality is Mark Carney's Liberals are talking about deep cuts to federal spending. Billions of dollars worth of cuts to federal spending. We're not going to be able to invest in healthcare with those kinds of cuts. For us in the NDP, we've been historic champions of healthcare. It's because of the NDP that we saw pharmacare and dental care has already rolled out. Seniors here in the PAW have been able to access it. Young people across our north have been able to access it. And it was because of the NDP that pushed the Liberals through our agreement to make changes, the largest expansion to healthcare in a generation. And that requires political will, that requires commitment to healthcare. We're not going to see those kinds of investments with billions of dollars worth of cuts like what we're hearing from Mark Carney. We need a strong voice to stand up and fight for more doctors, fight for more nurses, fight for more supports for healthcare workers, and fight for the kinds of investments in infrastructure here in the PAW and communities across our region.
All right, the next question centers around economic development. Many small rural and First Nation communities across northern Manitoba face challenges such as declining populations. We talked about healthcare, limited infrastructure, and access to services. What's your vision for the future of these communities, and what specific actions will you and your party take to support the growth, sustainability, and long-term success? Dylan, you're first.
I think we should take a multi-pronged approach here. One of the things that we found over time is that lower taxes will help increase the range of entrepreneurship that people can do. If we do reduce taxes a good deal, I think we're going to see quite a boom in not only this area, but all the other areas in Canada as well. One of our major industries up north has always been mining and our other natural resources. We should be able to open up new mines if the conditions are good. I don't see any reason why we should close mines. If we keep on opening up new avenues for people to invest in, people will come up north and they'll stay here. They just need a good opportunity.
Niki?
We know here in the north that a lot of the wealth of this country comes from First Nations territories, comes from northern communities, and so little of that wealth comes back. We know that there are major challenges when it comes to poverty, when it comes to inequality. And the reality is that we can change that. I'm encouraged by recent investments that we've seen from the NDP provincial government. And I've certainly been an advocate for years federally for investments in the rail line, in the port, which of course has a direct impact in the PAW. I would say we need critical investments in terms of infrastructure, continuing on an ongoing basis to invest in the railway. You know, I know so many of you in this room, and I was proud to support the calls to get rid of that American owner of Omnitracks that drove the rail line into the ground, our rail line in port. We need to make sure that the rail line coming out of the PAW all the way up to Churchill, that the port has the support it needs on an ongoing basis. We also need to invest in infrastructure, which we know is a job creator, building all-weather roads, fixing up our roads, and ensuring that there's federal money to do that work. And I would also say we need to make sure that workers in the resource sector are also protected, including here in the PAW. I know there are concerns with respect to Trump and his politics. We need to make sure that good jobs are protected here in our community, in OCN, and across the region. And finally, I want to talk about the importance of education and training. I was a proud instructor of UCN for years before getting into politics. I know what a difference it can make. We need to make sure that there is adequate federal investment at the post-secondary level. Unfortunately, Mark Carney's Liberals are talking about billions of dollars worth of cuts. We have to fight back. We need to make sure our voice is heard. And I have no problem taking on those in power to make sure that our region gets the investments and the supports we need. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I think this is a really important one for the riding. So when we think about what's happening across the country in terms of a response to the tariff wars, there's never been a more important time than now to reimagine what Canada's economy could look like. And we have to make sure that Churchill Keewatinook Aski is a central part of that strategy. And so we have the port, we have the rail line, we have critical minerals. So the federal Liberals have already invested $3.8 billion over 8 years to bolster Canada's role in the global critical mineral industry. However, $1.5 billion is going to infrastructure into Ontario's Ring of Fire. So we really need to think about what that means. We need to make sure that we're working hand in hand with Indigenous peoples, not around them. And so that's part of the issue here, is we need a clear understanding of how to move things forward. And so reconciliation needs to be an important part of this work, because we've been listening to the leaders. We were in Flin Flon today listening to the mayor there. They want to develop the mineral strategy, and they want to do that hand in hand with First Nations, because they know that that's important. They know that nothing is going to move forward unless it's in partnership with First Nations. And so it's important to have somebody like me, who is a bridge builder, who has an established network with the Indigenous leadership throughout Manitoba, somebody who's worked with all levels of government to move projects along and to ensure engagement, because that is the key to moving things forward. So the strategy has already attracted $6 billion in investments as well into like the automotive sector, because it's going to be focusing on building a battery supply chain. So there's a lot of developments that are happening now. We need to make sure that some of this money comes into the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding to build up a mineral strategy that's going to benefit everybody in the riding.
Thank you. Niki, how do we as a country make meaningful progress in achieving true reconciliation with Indigenous people?
This is a critical question, and I would say a excellent model on this front is the tri-community model you have here. The work of OCN, along with the PAW and the RM of Kelsey. I want to acknowledge leaders, Mayor Prue, Councillor Novo, and others who are very involved in doing that work on a daily basis. The reality is that we have to work together. That is the future, both in terms of addressing challenges, but achieving opportunities. And I know so much of that work happens here, both in terms of economic development, in terms of addressing infrastructure challenges, in terms of education and training opportunities. Terrific work is done here, and we need to do more of that and support this work from the federal level. But I will also be clear that in front of us, we have two national leaders, Poilievre, who we know has very troubling views when it comes to Indigenous reconciliation, and also Mark Carney, who has a troubling history. Mark Carney headed up Brookfield, a large corporation that was, over the last 5 years, that was found to have violated Indigenous rights in 4 countries. They fought Mississauga First Nation in Northern Ontario in court over 4 hydro dams that Mark Carney's company owns on their territory. Fought them in court and argued that they don't have the duty to consult. Unacceptable. He also fought, his company also violated Indigenous rights in Maine, in the northern US, in Colombia, and Brazil. This isn't somebody who understands reconciliation, somebody who understands corporate profit. but has done so by violating Indigenous rights, stampeding over environmental rights. This is not the model for our region. It's not the model for Canada. We need a strong voice to stand up to that kind of politics, that kind of misunderstanding that we're seeing from this new Liberal leader.
Thank you. Rebecca, same question.
So the question around reconciliation is that this Liberal government has never invested more in reconciliation than any other government. That is why we have seen huge investments into this riding in capital, in education, and there's still more to come. So when we think about the path to a strong economy, that lies in reconciliation and partnership with the North. Because this could be the grounds, this could be the model for reconciliation where we have Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples working together to build up the economy. So we know that Bill C-15 has passed and this is now law. And this bill refers to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So it means that Indigenous people must have free, prior, and informed consent, and not just after the fact. So the Liberal government has also doubled the guaranteed loan program for Indigenous people. So there is $10 billion that can be accessed by First Nations people to help build up the economy. So what does that mean? That means opportunity in partnership, opportunity for mining, for clean energy, opportunity for housing and transportation. The federal Liberals are also committing to building 500,000 homes every single year to help build the economy. So that means more jobs, more training. We also have to make sure we have the workforce to help with this rollout. So I think land reconciliation is really important. We have to look beyond symbolic land acknowledgements. We have to make it practical. What does this look like on the ground in terms of development and partnership? I hear from First Nations leaders as well. They want to partner, they want to grow the economy, but they also want to be equal partners. They didn't agree to be the poorest of the poor in their own homeland. So we need to work together.
Thank you. Dylan? Sure. No problem. How do we as a country make meaningful progress in achieving true reconciliation with Indigenous peoples?
My grandparents lived down south near Winnipeg. They own farms. They inherited those farms from their parents. And I presume at some point they actually pioneered the land by plowing it, clearing the brush, and making it manageable. I don't see why they get to do that and First Nations don't. Because many of the guys I know around town, they have yards, they've worked on their yards, they've spent decades maintaining it and improving their homes, but it's not theirs. The only thing that's theirs is the house. They have spent so much time and effort on these things that they should be able to pass those down to their children. And my party believes that we should explore options for land ownership, for on reserve land ownership for Indigenous communities. It doesn't make sense to me that we would just render it back to the band once we've developed it. Besides that, on the question of reconciliation, it's something that happens naturally just by living in your community with the people around you. It's not something you go out and declare, I'm going to reconcile today. It's a matter of being genuine to the people around you and being sincere. You can't force people to reconcile, and it's something that everyone does on their own time.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the candidates for staying on time and on topic at this point. Let's keep doing that. Next question revolves around skills. Everywhere, there are jobs without people and people without jobs, particularly in the skilled trades. How will you help employers and schools like UCN increase the availability of skilled tradespeople? And Rebecca, you're up first.
Okay, thank you for that question. So I have a master's in education and I've worked at Red River College as the executive director of Indigenous strategy. I've also worked at the University of Manitoba and a number of other institutions across the country because I was the vice president of Inspire. So that required me to work with post-secondaries across the country So in anything that we try to move forward, we have to make sure that we have the workforce to help develop it. And so when we think about skills, you know, there's huge opportunity to build skills and to build programs and to diversify the economy up here in the north. For example, the federal government is looking at investing billions in border patrol. So making sure that we're also building up the Arctic. So there are huge investments there. It'll be important to see if we bring some of that money into Manitoba, into this riding specifically, to ensure that young people in this riding have an opportunity to advance in those skills area. So when we think about the skills program, there's been huge investments in skills development for young people across this country. I think we need to see more. We've seen some investments in First Nations, Métis, and Inuit skills development. That's important for a riding like this because it has just under 80% Indigenous people, so we need to see that. We also need to focus on immigration and recognize the value that skilled laborers bring to our economy because we do have an aging population. So we have to find a balance between that. But I think it's really important to look in our own communities and to see what's needed. We see a lot of unemployment as well with young people, with Indigenous people, and we need to make sure that we look at that as our first priority because we want our young people to stay in the north and to help build up the economy. So that's something that I'm committed to. That's something that I know really well. I'm great at developing programs, working with government, and finding the funds to make sure that we could build the programs.
Thank you. Dylan?
Every so often I hear a joke that isn't quite a joke. And it goes something like, yeah, I went to university. I got a business degree. And I laugh and I ask them if it was worth it. And they typically don't say yes, although maybe that's because I don't talk to businessmen very often. We should encourage young people to go into trades rather than just get their degrees at university. There's a lot of waste in terms of degrees that don't actually make any returns. If we encourage people to go into their trades, we can end up with a much more robust population that's self-sufficient. And it phrased that wrong, but if we encourage people to go into the trades, I'm sure it'll be better than it is. These people that do go into trades are strong members of our community, and they do pull quite a bit of their weight.
Okay, thank you. Niki?
I know firsthand the important work that UCN does in our communities. I worked in one of the remote campuses, teaching up in Fox Lake and of course in Thompson as well. And I think we need to be clear that in order to be able to support UCN, we need to see more funding, including from the federal government. We saw cuts under the Conservative government. We haven't seen the kinds of investments we've needed with the previous Liberal government. And the reality is post-secondary funding does also come from the federal government. As I mentioned, Jack Layton fought for key investments that allowed for this campus to expand and for the Thompson campus to be built. So let's not kid ourselves. When we hear the Liberal leader talk about deep cuts to federal funding, that is and could affect possible funding for post-secondary education. And that's simply not acceptable given the challenges that we face and the opportunities in front of us as we look to secure our economy in the face of the Trump administration. The reality is we need to be investing in the trades. We need to make sure that there are models for Northerners, Northern and Indigenous students to be able to get a trade. And we also need to make sure that any resource development happening in our region is making sure that there is opportunities for local apprenticeships and local employment. A lot of that is provincial, but we need to see the federal government supporting that kind of work. But I also want to talk about the need to support youth from day one. And right now we are seeing deep cuts to Jordan's Principle from this Liberal government. We in the NDP fought back against cuts to Jordan's Principle in the last budget. And unfortunately in this fiscal year, we've started to see cuts already to basic funding. We need to give all our kids a chance. We need to give kids on OCN, here in the PAW, in communities across our region that need Jordan's Principle funding a chance. Not with this Liberal government. We need a strong voice to fight for our youth from day one until they get the trade they need.
The next question is about immigration. Manitoba and Canadian universities are struggling due to limits on international students. Without immigration, Manitoba's population would actually be in decline. The labor force relies on skilled immigrants as well. What is your party's stance on immigration? And we'll start with you first, Dylan.
My party advocates a very strong stance in reducing it. There's various reasons, but prime among them is that it's causing societal issues. There's deficiencies in our infrastructure and economy. This is mainly because there's population growth happens over a period of decades. I remember back in school, we'd find out, oh yeah, the population doubles every 50 years. Isn't that weird? But more so, it's that our systems only have a chance to adapt when you look at it from a long-term view. Like we can't increase the sewer system every year. We can't increase the electrical grid every year. We need time and we need to slow down. What we should be doing is focusing on building our strong communities and families to meet the needs of our society. Reducing immigration will create an environment where this actually becomes the easier choice. Furthermore, when you're born and raised in Canada, you have an implicit connection with your neighbors, and this is one of the things that makes high-trust societies. If we tighten our requirements on cultural values, even more for those who are coming in, we can end up with a very nice society where we can all understand each other.
Thank you. Niki?
First, I just want to express real concern about the views that we are hearing from the PPC. We need to be clear, immigration is a key part of our community, of our north, of our country. And I would say that many know this in this room. I know small business owners, leaders in the community, the Chamber of Commerce knows. And unfortunately, who doesn't seem to understand is the Liberal government. The changes, the ham-fisted changes they made to international student regulations, as well as to the temporary foreign worker program, has left institutions, businesses, communities, and more importantly, immigrants themselves in the lurch. We know that ensuring more international students here at UCN campuses, would mean more opportunities for UCN. We also know that ensuring that people can come and immigrate here, work in our communities, access training, build their families here is what also contributes to building a better and brighter Northern Manitoba. But we're not going to do that with a Liberal government that overnight, as a knee-jerk reaction, particularly to the Conservatives, changes immigration policy, leaving everybody in the lurch. I've been proud to work with so many families impacted. We've worked with businesses impacted. It is clear we need a way for people to be able to come here, to study here, to work here, to live here. And we need to make sure that the federal government is understanding our particular needs here in the PAW, in OCN, in Northern Manitoba, and in regions like ours, where diversity is our strength. We're ensuring that businesses can operate, we're ensuring institutions can access more opportunity is key to building a brighter future for our region together. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Yeah. So immigration needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be inclusive, and it needs to support services. We can't download onto our communities that are already stretched thin with services. So in Northern Manitoba, we're facing a demographic crossroads. We know that we need skilled laborers in the north because we have a shrinking workforce, an aging population, and we also have rising demand in healthcare, education, construction, and clean energy. So immigration has played a necessary role, like it's been filling these gaps, but immigration alone is not a workforce strategy, especially when it's downloaded onto communities that, like I said, are already stretched thin. And we also need to think about Northern youth and Indigenous youth that continue to remain unemployed. So the liberal government is going to invest in settlement services, not just immigration targets. We need to reduce our reliance on temporary foreign labor and prioritize pathways for employment for Canadian citizens. So we'll promote regional immigration strategies. That means working with your leadership, working with the leadership from Churchill, Keewatinook Aski, for example. And I think that's really important. So getting out there, talking to people, what is it that we actually need, and finding different ways to solve problems. Like, we have to be the problem solvers of the issues that we're dealing with in our own communities. That means coming together, talking and figuring it out. And that's something that I'm really good at. So when we think about what we need more healthcare workers, construction, education, and the clean energy sector. I did want to point out that in 2025, the government reduced the number of international student permits to 4,337. This is a 10% decrease from the previous year, aiming to alleviate the pressure on housing, healthcare, and other services. So there's a target to bring balance to this and to make sure that we can support immigration in our communities.
Thank you. Moving on to housing. High costs of housing, high cost of construction, shortage of skilled labor all contribute to the cost of a home in northern Manitoba. What will you and your party do to make the dream of owning a home a reality for people who don't have one? Niki.
Housing is at the center of wellness and frankly, the struggles in so many of our communities. I want to acknowledge that the housing crisis is particularly acute in First Nations across our region. We know that the Liberals have invested less than 1% of what's needed to end the Indigenous housing crisis. At the current rate, it will take between 58 and 141 years to satisfy current needs. Not only that, the Liberals wanted to cut billions of dollars from Homes for First Nations last year, cuts that the NDP stopped. And unfortunately, at that time and to this day, not one Liberal spoke out. We need to make sure that there's housing in OCN, in First Nations across our region. And we also need to make sure that we are supporting the building of homes, refurbishing of homes here, including with federal funding. I'm proud of the work that the NDP has done to push for more investments in housing, and we're aware of successful projects. I want to acknowledge the MMF's work, Judy Mayer, and the MMF's very unique housing investment here in the PAW. We need to see more of that. But once again, let's be clear, this requires federal leadership and funding. Deep cuts, as we're hearing from Mark Carney, won't get us there. We need to fight back and talk clearly about the housing insecurity in our communities, what it means for people who are living in overcrowded homes in OCN, what it means for people that are struggling here in the PAW. We need to see investments in co-op housing, in social housing, in housing that makes sense for people here in our northern communities. And we need the federal government to work with us. We know that these are projects that will not just address the housing crisis, they will create jobs and they will make our northern communities better off. And that is something that I am committed to fighting for.
Rebecca.
So when we look at what's happening throughout the riding, we know there is a housing crisis. It's not just in First Nations, it's right across the country. It's in urban areas. We're seeing aging infrastructure, it's not standing up. So earlier I said that the federal Liberals are committed to investing 500,000 homes each and every year. So that's going to kickstart our workforce, create new jobs, and bring more homes to all of our communities. That's why it's really important when we think about what that means for the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding. You want somebody at the decision-making table that will say, hey, what about the riding? What about my riding? And to help bring those funds here, to make sure that we get some of those homes here. So I know that the federal Liberals have also So they're also looking at eliminating the GST on homes under $1 million for first-time home buyers. So this will save families up to $50,000. It's also going to cut red tape and lower construction costs, defend programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund, which conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wants to scrap. So when we think about housing, there's also some other investments. There's the Build Canada Homes, which includes northern specific solutions. I was working with KTC on looking at a housing strategy that was looking to bring over $3 billion administratively through Churchill under the KTC. So the federal Liberals had promised over $3.6 billion to address the housing crisis. And so we're looking at solutions that involve the North and Indigenous, and these are direct projects that I've been involved in, and we want to see them through. So that's why you need to vote Liberal to make sure that these funds actually get into our communities and the North.
Dylan?
It's a bit of a paradox. So, we need more houses. Let's build more houses. We don't have enough people to build the houses. Let's bring some more people in to build the houses, but they need houses too. So this keeps on going and it's never fixed. One of the things that I think everyone needs to know is that it's unaffordable to buy a house. In 1990, average house price in Canada was about 120,000. Average salary, about 55,000. If you saved money for a while, for maybe a year or two, maybe 3, you could work your way towards owning a house. In 2023, average house price is 820,000. Average household income, 106,000. There is no good solution right now for owning houses because we need to reduce the number of people that need a house, or at least reduce the number of people that are going to need a house. So if we reduce this, we can start to work at this problem. This problem didn't happen overnight. This has been in the works for 30 years. It won't just be as simple as snapping our fingers and saying, oh yeah, we're going to contribute money for this. It's a matter of making hard decisions and finding out what solutions we can live with. Because the thing is that young people are going to be affected by this. Nowadays, how many years does it take for a young person to buy a house? Several, at least 7, 8, 10. How about their children? When their children are adults, how long will it take for them to buy a house? Maybe 20 years. Grandchildren, maybe they'll never own a house. This is something important, and it's something that never gets addressed. Only told that we just need more houses. If we build more houses, it'll solve the problem.
From housing to homelessness. Homeless numbers have steadily increased across Manitoba and Canada. What would you do to help people and communities address this issue? Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. I've seen firsthand the homelessness in our communities, and it's devastating. It's devastating to see that some of our communities are living in third world conditions, that they have to use the gym in their school to house people. And this isn't just in First Nations, this is in our urban areas as well, Thompson, the Paw, Flin Flon, and it's right across the board because of this housing crisis. I think it's important that we work with all levels of government to find the solutions. I know that there's First Nations communities, for example, that are trying to use their own lumber, so they're developing sawmills in their communities, but there's restrictions that allow them from using their own wood to build their own homes. So we need to look at resolving these issues because First Nations people want to build their own homes. There's certain regulations in place that limit them to do that. So these are the kinds of things that we need to look at in terms of being the problem solvers of the issues that we're dealing with in our own communities. When you look at the homelessness issue as well, definitely something that I will fight for if I'm elected into government representing you. I've worked with HA, with the Housing Addictions and Homelessness unit on some other things. So I think it's really important to understand the intersections between homelessness, between exclusion, institutional racism, intergenerational trauma, mental health. We also have to address the drug issue. We have too many drugs coming into our communities, coming into our country. That's why border control is really important, and that's why the money that the Liberals are looking to invest are important, because a lot of the homeless people that we see today are people that are dealing with mental health issues and addictions. And so we need to figure out how to get ourselves well again, you know, as a community, as a nation, and as a country. So that's why we need to vote Liberal.
Dylan?
Homelessness is a bit of a complicated topic. I have some experience. I see them in my backyard sometimes. So I'm going to be specific when I start out here, because there are two distinct groups here. There's the people who are homeless, but that is because they don't have a home. They are living out there in their van or something. And I don't think we need to talk about that right now. They'll figure it out. I'm sure they've got a plan. The other group that I like to talk about is those who have addictions that control their lives. They spend their lives out on the streets, and although they do have friends out there, it is quite harrowing to see them out there all the time. I've called the ambulance or the police multiple times because I see one being beaten by another one. One time, a guy just passed out in my yard. I called the ambulance, but not before his lady friend stole his money out of his pocket. These aren't people who behave normally or rationally. If somebody commits a crime and they are on drugs and they are not able to understand the situation they are in, they should be put into treatment. This is not something that we can just release them as soon as they're sober. If we reduce, like, we spend millions on new arrivals in immigration. If we could divert some of that, I'm sure we could actually solve a huge amount of our homelessness problem. But as it stands, homelessness just continues to exist in our community. Nobody does anything about it.
Niki?
Homelessness is very evident in our communities across the north, and it is extremely heartbreaking. We know that a key factor has to do with housing insecurity in many communities across our region. People coming into urban centers for some access to services, some basic opportunities. And the reality is that the supports aren't there the way we need them to be. I've been proud to work with others in this community and support advocacy to ensure that there's ongoing funding for homeless shelters like Oscar's Place, like the shelter that we had in Thompson previously, like the ongoing work that needs to happen in our communities. We need to be clear about what's happening in our communities right now, important work being done by people right now, and the need for the federal government to support that. And that kind of knowledge is known by those of us that actually live in our communities. We see who's doing the work to help those who need help, and we also know what it takes to fight back for the resources that are necessary. The fact that there is not ongoing funding, permanent ongoing funding for Oscar's Place, including from the federal government, is not acceptable. Or for friendship centers that do this work, or for organizations that do this work. We need to make sure that the federal government is part of the solution. But speaking of the Liberals' track record, the Liberals missed every single target they had in the National Housing Strategy to reduce homelessness. Given the drug crisis in our communities, given the addictions crisis in our communities, they cannot be trusted to just carry on as they have because their plan isn't working. I'm aware of how much our communities are hurting right now and the need for healing programs, the need for addictions programs, the need for more supports in terms of community safety. That is all part of addressing not just the homelessness crisis, but the hopelessness crisis that exists in our communities. We have a lot of work to do, and it starts with having a strong voice to fight back.
I want to squeak one last question in the moderated round. We're going to cut it to 1 minute for these answers, okay? And it's basically, what do you personally see as the most important issue facing Northern Manitoba, looking toward maybe some of the opportunities or advantages that are here in the north? Dylan, you're up first. 1 minute.
Absolutely. One of the biggest issues that we have up north nowadays is crime. 2 months ago in February, somebody robbed two old ladies in town, stole their prescription, shot up their house. A few years ago, somebody robbed the Timber Mart with an axe. Last year, somebody robbed the Fast Gas. These things didn't used to happen. We need to reduce the amount of crime that's happening and punish those who are doing it. As we, hold on. I had this. One of the biggest opportunities that we have, just to segue, is the untapped natural resources we have up here. We probably see more trees in a day than some people down south see all year. We have like lush natural forests. We have great rivers, great lakes, great fishing. It's always been that way, and it should continue to be that way.
Nikki?
A key concern we have in our communities, and obviously I hear as I visit door to door, is the affordability crisis. Life has always been more expensive here in the north, but it has become even more expensive. Families struggling, elders, seniors struggling, children going hungry without what they need. And the reality is that while all of Canada is struggling with an affordability crisis, it hits us here harder. The NDP has been clear we need key measures like a cap on grocery essentials. And we need key measures when it comes to expanding our social programs in terms of access to healthcare services, in terms of housing, and investments in key services and infrastructure needed. The reality is that we cannot afford to leave people behind. And we have tremendous opportunity, but the greatest opportunity is our people here in the north. We need to invest in them by helping Northerners address the affordability crisis and moving forward. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Yeah, so some of the key issues include the housing crisis, which we discussed, the overcrowdedness, substandard, the inadequate housing in many First Nations and in urban areas, limited affordable rental housing. And our response has been $4 billion housing accelerator fund, federal lands repurposed for housing. We're looking at support for Indigenous-led housing as well, and rapid housing initiatives to target homelessness and urgent needs. When we look at opportunity, there's transportation and trade infrastructure, Arctic Gateway Group, for example, the Port of Churchill, the Hud Bay Railway. We now know that this is owned by Northerners as well as Indigenous partners. This is going to focus on economic development. We're looking at a Canadian Northern Corridor, so a proposed multi-modal transportation corridor through Canada's north. So that means Churchill, Keewatinook Aski, defense and sovereignty. We've committed $30.9 billion over 4 years to bolster Arctic defense, including infrastructure development and partnership. So these are just some of the things that are focusing on economic development and job creation.
Thank you. Dan, you have a couple questions that came in online.
Hey guys, yeah, so we have a Zoom link and there's a few people joining us online, and so we've got a couple questions here. I have two. One is directed just to Miss Ashton, but I have one here for everybody. So what is your stance on protecting Canadian local journalism like CBC and community news sources? And how have you been supporting and utilizing local media during your campaign?
Oh, this is a favorite topic because I have taken on a few CBC presidents over the cuts to CBC here in our region. And the reality is our public broadcaster has an obligation to ensure services here in our region. And for a number of years, they got away with spotty service. They cut the job here in the PA, of course, Charles Altman. They shut down the studio in Thompson, which is not acceptable. We need a CBC here in our north. We need our stories told by people here in our north, not by people in Winnipeg that come up from time to time. And we need to make sure that the CBC, our public broadcaster, that belongs to all of us, is also here in northern Manitoba. And I'm pleased after a lot of advocacy and pushing, we finally have somebody in the Thompson studio working on behalf of the CBC. But we also need to make sure that local journalism exists and thrives in our communities. Who else is going to tell our stories? I use Facebook, we all do, but that's not good enough. We need to make sure that there's supports for our papers, for radio, for media in our regions, based in our region. Thompson, we just lost our newspaper that existed since the late 1960s. You know, this is, and I acknowledge the hard work being done at the team at the Apasqua Times. The reality is we need to make sure that the local journalism initiative is locked in so that companies like the one that owned the Thompson Citizen don't run off with that money and shut down our newspapers. We need to make sure that we have ways of telling our stories, whether it's the CBC and making sure that they're based here, that we're holding them to it, and whether it's in terms of newspapers and supporting radio, including AR Radio, that does an incredible job in connecting our communities. There's a lot more work to do in the age of shrinking media. I'm here to fight for our voices to be heard and our stories to be told.
Rebecca?
Same question? Okay. So the Liberals are committed to protecting public broadcasting. So we're looking at strengthening the CBC radio as a national public broadcaster, unlike the Conservatives that we know who are trying to defund it. We know that CBC provides critical access to news, emergency alerts, cultural contact, and Indigenous voices in places where media won't go. So in communities that are remote, isolated, the Paw, Thompson, Churchill, and remote First Nations. The Carney government has also prioritized funding for Indigenous language, radio, and storytelling, which we know is important for this riding. We also have unreserved CBC Indigenous and APTN that collaborates. We also need to look at digital expansion and local voices. There are still communities in the north that do not have connectivity, and that needs to be considered a human rights violation because we're creating a much greater gap between our young people and the rest of the world if they do not have access to the internet. So we need digital expansion, we need to modernize CBC infrastructure and expand local content. So overall, I think we're in it to help protect and build CBC to make sure that it continues to be a part of this region.
Dylan?
If you love it, let it go. The CBC should choose whether it's going to be accepting federal monies or if it's going to be accepting advertising dollars. If it's accepting federal monies, then it should be maintaining itself as an unbiased, trustworthy news source. As it stands, I don't see any particular evidence to believe it's capable of that. And so we should either cut federal spending or remove its ability to accept advertising dollars.
Okay, next question here, and this one is directed just for you, Niki. So the question goes here, beyond raising awareness of the challenges faced by northern communities, what specific actions or outcomes have you influenced at the federal level to help address these issues and bring about tangible change in our region?
Well, thank you very much, the person who sent in the question and everybody that's tuning in. It's been important for me to fight for our region every single day. It's been important for me to take on conservative ministers, governments, liberal ministers, prime ministers, governments, to make sure that our voice is being heard and that our priorities are being pushed forward. I'm particularly proud of the work we did over the last 3 years in terms of our agreement with the government in delivering the largest expansion of healthcare, including dental care and pharmacare. We also pushed forward on protections for workers. We pushed forward in terms of key investments in housing, including Indigenous housing, and there's much more that needs to be done. The reality is those measures would not have taken place, would not have become a reality if it wasn't the NDP pushing for them. We've seen Liberals in the past cut programming. We've seen Liberals in the past discount voices like Jody Wilson-Raybolt's and Jane Philpott's, strong women, a strong Indigenous woman, in saying that they needed to do better on reconciliation. They needed to do better in terms of investments, including in healthcare. And the reality is that they pushed them out. It's the NDP that was able to push for tangible change for Canadians. I make no apologies for making a lot of noise about the need for Arctic Gateway to be able to take over for the rail line and the port. I make no apologies for making noise to talk about the need for public safety supports in our region as we face a drug crisis. I make no apologies for making it clear that our little ones, whether it's funding through Jordan's Principle that the Liberals have cut, or the need for more support in terms of education and training, are issues that need to be heard. I'm from here. I live here. I raised my family here. I know what we face, and I'm proud to have a strong voice to be able to fight for better, which is what we deserve. Thank you.
Is there a question from the floor? Okay. We'll do 1 minute each. Is it to each candidate?
Rebecca, I've listened to yourself and everybody else speak here tonight. And the one thing that you did mention is that there hasn't been any Liberal representative basically in this region for 17 years, I believe. And but so the question I have is, why hasn't there been any Liberal representation? Because the previous candidates that were running for Liberal are similar to the PC candidate that seems to be a ghost in this riding or whatever. So I was just wondering, I don't think that there's been any push by the federal government to get anything done in northern Manitoba since John Churchill was the Prime Minister. So,
Rebecca, a minute?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think you're asking why there has been no Liberal presence in the riding. I guess it comes down to elections. People need to get out and vote. But when we think about Niki Ashton and why she's dominated this riding for 17 years, you have to acknowledge that her father, Steve Ashton, was also in the provincial government for a couple decades as well. So that gives her an advantage over everybody else because she has access to dollars, to infrastructure. So when I ran in 2015, I wasn't just running against Niki Ashton, I was running against 5 provincial MLAs. And we even had Greg Selinger out in the community campaigning against me. So this is a privilege that we don't have. I am an Indigenous woman. I don't come from money. We know the history of our people. We are the poorest of the poor in this country. When we signed treaties, we didn't agree to be the poorest of the poor. We said we were willing to move over and share our lands for mutual benefit and mutual obligation.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And we're still waiting for that. And I think that's important to remember.
You have a question?
I thank for coming out to meet with us here. My question is, I've listened all evening. I have not heard one word of you helping out or what your intentions are for seniors. I've lived here for 38 years. I'm in the midst that if I can't stay where I'm living now, which is in my own home, I have no place as a senior to move to stay here in my hometown.
Okay, to each candidate, we'll start with Dylan. 1 minute.
The issue being is what will we do about the seniors who have housing situations? We could certainly open up care homes, but we also need to recognize that we need young people around to actually staff these homes. It won't be an immediate thing, but we do need to increase the amount of young people in our community. And although I can't speak much further than that.
Niki?
Thank you for sharing that important point. And when we talk about housing, we need to make sure that there's seniors housing, that the federal government is investing in that as well. We need to be talking about supporting seniors who face, especially senior women who face disproportionate rates in terms of poverty, looking at increasing the OAS, making sure that there's financial supports. And I'm proud of the NDP with its affordability measures with respect to the grocery cap, ensuring that there's actual measures to help people facing economic insecurity, including seniors. And I just want to, while I have a moment, I just want to address the question previously. And I very concerned about the statements that were raised I'm proud to have worked with a strong NDP provincial government years ago. I am proud to come from a region that supports the NDP because of the difference the NDP makes in our communities. I think an important point is that most of the Liberals that have ran in the last 17 years don't actually live in the North. How can you represent our area if you don't actually live here, is my question.
Rebecca?
In terms of commitments to elders, absolutely. We hear that at the door as well. With an aging population, it's important that we get housing out for elders as well. And we've heard that from every community that we've been talking to. So that's definitely something that we're going to be advocating for. In terms of some of the supports from the Liberal government, there's been a restoration to the eligibility age from 67 to 65 to ensure early access to benefits for seniors. There's also been the GIS, which increases for single seniors. So it's enhanced the GIS for single seniors to provide extra support for Canada's lowest income seniors. The CPP enhancement, there's collaboration with provinces to enhance the CPP, aiming to provide more income in retirement for working Canadians. The employment insurance compassionate care benefit, it was introduced as a more flexible and accessible benefit to assist Canadians caring for seriously ill family members. There's also affordable housing. Oh, did I go over?
We're at time. We're unfortunately in a real time crunch. We have to wrap up. We're getting to closing statements now because there's planes that have to be caught before taking off. So we're going to go to closing statements now. And Niki, you're first. We have 2 minutes for each statement.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here tonight. And for the record, we were committed to be hearing until 9 p.m. And I'm very much looking forward to visiting with people after. I want to be clear. Our choice for who is going to represent us in Parliament matters. It's an important one. Our region, our riding, one of 14 in Manitoba, one of 343 in Canada, needs to have a strong voice. And we know that in our communities, that strong voice is often the NDP that stands up and speaks truthfully about the challenges we face, but is also part of the solution in terms of the investments, the opportunities that we need to achieve. A vote for the NDP makes a difference because the NDP makes a difference for us. Mark Carney, the leader of the Liberals, has a track record of, under his corporation, avoiding taxes to the tune of billions of dollars that could have been reinvested in our economy. One of the first things he did when he became leader was he got rid of the capital gains tax that would have taxed millionaires so that resources that could come back to our healthcare, to housing, to our communities. And on reconciliation, you've heard how he's not part of the solution, he's part of the problem. We know that Pierre Poilievre is also talking about cuts like Mark Carney. These aren't solutions for our riding. These aren't solutions for the challenges we face and the opportunities in front of us. I'm proud of the strong tradition that the NDP has in our communities, fighting and delivering. The Liberal candidate talked about people voting NDP without not knowing why, including elders. I find that disrespectful. MLA Amanda Laughlin talked about that. People here in the North know what the NDP has done for them, and there is a lot more work to be done. And with a Liberal government that's talking about cuts, with the Conservatives talking about cuts, we in the NDP, I as a Northerner who lives here, who loves our home, am here to fight for all of us. Thank you. Now,
Rebecca?
Yeah. It's not on.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you here today. I know that people say that I'm not from here. I am an Anishinaabe in Innu. My son is from Treaty 5, York Landing. Our people have moved around these territories. I have family members throughout the riding. I've worked in Little Grand Rapids, Pongassi, Lac Brochet. My mom has lived and worked in St. Teresa Point and York Landing. We have relatives across this riding. I have deep roots and deep relationships with a lot of the leadership throughout the North. And I've also been working with government to carry out a number of engagement sessions to make sure that we're moving in the right direction in terms of addressing poverty and also addressing anti-racism. So I'm a bridge builder. I get work done. I didn't aspire to be a politician, but I had people pushing me from behind saying, you need to get in there. You need to be a voice and you're good at getting things done. So it was Phil Fontaine who asked me to run in 2015. I said no. After asking me 3 times, I said yes after talking to my family and my elders. My presence has been consistent in the North through my business, where I'm working consistently with the North, with leaders. I worked with MKO last year on a health, wellness, and safety and justice strategy. I worked with KTC on their housing strategy as well. I've been advocating for connectivity in the North, so I brought $8.5 million in under BCN, Broadband Communication North, through my lobbying, working with that organization that was securing connectivity in the North. So this helped to ensure that more communities had phone service. And we know that that's a safety issue because when you're out on the roads, when you're on those winter roads, you need access. So I know that Niki has said that, she said some things, but I think it's important to recognize that she's checked out and I'm here showing up, meeting with our leadership relationship.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dylan?
So I haven't actually spent any time this forum yet talking about the other parties, and there's actually a very good reason for that. They don't matter. The Liberals don't matter. The NDP don't matter. If you swap them, you would not notice the difference, to be honest. To be specific, it's actually the people in here who matter, the people who vote, the people who make decisions, because it's us, like regular people, who make decisions. It's not the politicians who end up actually leaving a mark in our lives. It's our neighbors, our friends, our family. And what we need to do is actually be involved with the people around us. We need to actually spend time talking to our neighbors. There's a loneliness epidemic. You hear stories about kids in Northern Reserves. What happens is that, oh, he slept with my boyfriend. Oh, I'm going to cut myself now. It ends up being this whole thing where these people get into bad relationships with each other. They do not talk enough with older people, with people who have been there, who have been in their situation, and they understand what they should do next. It ends up being much more than it should be. And these mistakes aren't new. These things have been with us forever. The young person who doesn't know what to do, the older person who just wants somebody to talk to. We just need to communicate with each other more. And that's all that that's not all that matters, but it's a huge part of it. And I think that at the end of the day, it's us who matters, not the politicians.
Thank you to all the candidates, again, for being respectful, staying on time, and helping answer a lot of our questions tonight. I'm going to pass it over to Dan to wrap things up.
Thank you, Monty. And just wanted to, extend our gratitude and say thanks to all the candidates. It takes a lot of courage to get up in front of your peers and your neighbors and the community and, share your thoughts. So yeah, round of applause. And also for everybody here tonight and joining us online, thank you for taking a couple hours out of your evening to come down, and share some questions and get some feedback from the candidates. I just will say that we have the space till 9. So if you want to hang around and maybe come up and converse with any of the candidates that are sticking around after, by all means. And just make sure you get out there and vote if you haven't already. It's what separates us from the monkeys, right? Is democracy. So let's utilize it. Thank you again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niki. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks a lot for yeah, it's you know, sometimes I wish to start going